Anarchist core of ideals that are being played out. And it's been really beautiful. Like, for those of us who like those ideas. I mean, that's huge. But the real lift of this, the real transformational possibility of this came from regular Americans connecting the fact that they lost their jobs, they lost their health care, they lost everything. So, to this enough is enough tactic, right? So one of the things we've been trying to do, and we had this initial pool of churches that were really interested, and a lot of them were the typical rabble-rouser, social justice-minded places. But there was more and more of an impression by, like, the faith community, and this will lead to the story. This is becoming less and less about our issues, and more about this group of anarchists and their kind of movement, trying to just survive. So the story is anarchist v. police, and that's just not a really compelling case. Like, maybe I don't identify with these people. You know, that's what we heard from a lot of faith communities. How does this still represent us? Because, by the way, we have been having communities of radical inclusion and taking care of our neighborhoods for a long time. And all of a sudden, you, white kids, do it. You privileged people do it, and suddenly it's news. Why should we come along with you? Who do you represent? I mean, who are you? Other than your angry, young, white, privileged rhetoric. So we started deciding we wanted to make these actions that really reflect the broadest swath of different communities as possible. So we took something like the budget cuts on a state level that cut off funding to all of these direct services. And basically all this money was getting cut for things like shelters and kitchens and schools. And it was going right to tax corporate loopholes. And that's a really clear case of money going from poor people to really rich people. And it affected almost any community, church community, that we talked to in a really direct way. So the question was like, how do we dramatize this? How do we tell that story and make it part of the Occupy movement? So basically we decided to come up with this thing where we were going to do parables of an immoral budget in an Occupy style, in a confrontational theater. The idea was we would do things like if there was direct cuts to, what am I trying to say? Shelters. We would make our own shelter right there on the steps of the governor's office in New York. If there's direct cuts to soup kitchens, we'll put on a soup kitchen right out there. So it'll be charity, but it'll be this, by its inconvenient placement right on the sidewalk in front, it'll be this ginormous statement. And a couple of them happened. And the most recent one was sometime in March, I forget the day, where we got faith leaders, imams, rabbis, Buddhist monks, a lot of ministers, of course, priests, nuns, and a lot of their kind of communities came out. And we had a press conference across the street from the governor's office. And we laid out 5 beds. We had these fully made beds. They were functional beds and you could sleep in them. And some people were laying in them. And a mixture of occupiers and faith leaders then took them across the street to the governor's office, and we laid them out right in front of his office, here in New York, not in the upstate office. And it was a really beautiful thing. Because we had these 90-year-old Paul, who is this beautiful old priest, sweet guy. And we sang hymns together and laid it all out and blocked the... It was great. And we had Sister Susan and Louis, great people, a really diverse crowd. And of course, within seconds, the police were there before we even... now, part of this is we live in this huge police state culture. This has been becoming the case for a while, but in post 9/11 and now post Occupy, it's they're everywhere. They're literally everywhere. There were police outside church on this Sunday morning. I mean, that exact confrontation with them was like, well, you have to let us in. This is a public space. Well, I'm the minister of this church. This is not a public space. And I can say who comes in and who doesn't. Take off your guns. Lay them down right here. And if you want to come to church, you can. Did you see that coming in?